No one in that gold-lined room realized a single sentence could crack an entire empire. And the moment Catherine Whitmore let her words drop, the atmosphere in the glittering banquet hall shifted as if even the crystal chandeliers shivered. Light spilling across the marble floor seemed to stumble when Catherine's voice cut through the music, cold and sharp as a blade. "Who let that country girl walk up to our table?" Soft laughter erupted around the central table, spreading like poison through water. Crystal glasses chimed against each other, not in celebration, but in collective approval of the insult she had just launched. Every gaze locked onto the woman who had just arrived, Naomi Carter, wearing a muted copper dress, no flashy jewelry, no shimmering display, only a poised stance, and a face calm as a lake before a storm. She did not tremble, nor avert her eyes, only lifted her gaze slightly, so the lights above struck her eyes quiet but metallic, like steel refined in fire. In that instant, it was Naomi's silence that made the entire room falter. Catherine smirked, the kind of smile born from a lifetime of privilege, from the comfort of throwing stones at anyone she believed unworthy of sharing her table. "Or did you wander into the wrong section?" she asked, tilting her head, her voice honeyed but venom in every syllable. "This table is for major sponsors, not for dreamers." The word dreamers landed like a slap, triggering louder laughter. A few men in tuxedos clicked their tongues in approval. A woman snapped a photo to post online, as if capturing premium entertainment. A young server nearby froze for a beat, eyes wide, wanting to intervene, but terrified to step into a world he knew he was not part of. Naomi slowly rested her hand on the back of the chair, the movement soft but controlled, as though she were steadying the entire room, barreling toward chaos. "I'm sitting exactly where I was invited," she said, her voice smooth and low, a sound that didn't need volume to command attention. The laughter stumbled to a halt. A few faces shifted, surprised by the absence of fear in her tone. Catherine hated that. Her eyes flickered, irritated that her intended prey wasn't reacting the way she wanted. Invited, she lifted a brow in disbelief. "By whom? Or did you sneak in just to see what the upper class looks like up close?" This time it wasn't just laughter. Phones rose into the air. Whispers floated. "Record it. This is going viral." But Naomi's stillness became the real contagion, spreading fast, tightening around everyone's senses, thickening the air. Naomi looked straight at Catherine, then at the faces laughing along as if reading every layer of pretense beneath their diamonds. "I used to think elegance came from what people wore, or where they sat," Naomi said softly, her voice drifting like reflection, yet each word striking with precision. "But tonight I realized it is simply about who needs to speak the loudest while being the smallest on the inside." The sentence fell like metal hitting stone. No more laughter, no sharp breaths, just a silence stretched so tight it hummed. A glass shattered somewhere behind them, the sound slicing the moment and marking the shift in power across the room. Catherine narrowed her eyes, her earlier smile hardening into a stiff line. "What did you just say? You may leave now?" Naomi replied, her voice never rising even once. A man nearby whispered under his breath, "Oh my God." A woman covered her mouth, breath shaking. The musicians attempted a note, but faltered their hands, hovering above their instruments. Catherine flushed, scrambling to regain control. "Security!" She screamed, her voice high with panic and rage. "Get her out now." Two guards approached but halted when they saw Naomi's unshaken calm. She merely looked at Catherine and said gently, "If you are afraid of embarrassment, you should wait 5 more minutes." Someone in the crowd choked on air. A few guests whispered, What did she mean by that? Catherine frowned, furious, yet unmistakably unsettled, the kind of unease that comes from sensing a storm without knowing if it is headed straight for you. Naomi lifted her glass, but didn't drink. She simply set it down again, so softly the glass barely made a sound, yet the silence that followed weighed heavier than any crash. In Naomi's eyes there was something not quite like defiance, but closer to a warning. A warning the opulent room still did not understand, a warning that it was about to witness a reckoning powerful enough to dismantle an empire that thought itself untouchable. And that gala night, a night that began with the laughter of the elite, was slowly transforming into the stage for a downfall none of them ever saw coming. The air inside the banquet hall hung suspended between two breaths, one filled with arrogance, trembling on the edge of collapse, the other radiating Naomi's steady calm so sharp it made the glittering crystal room feel as if one more sentence could shatter it into dust. Catherine froze for a few seconds, then tried to resurrect a smile, already fractured the smile of someone accustomed to dominance, someone who despised nothing more than being challenged in front of the very people she considered her territory. "Are you trying to threaten me?" Catherine drew out each word, her voice trembling beneath a layer of red lipstick that barely concealed her rising fury. "Who do you think you are?" Whispers spread through the tables. She said 5 minutes. What does that mean? Is something about to happen? Goodness! Whitmore finally met someone she cannot push around. A few phones turned on secretly, faces powdered and painted, leaned close together to catch every detail. Naomi did not answer immediately. Her silence wound the tension tighter with each passing second, as if someone were pulling a stringed instrument to its breaking point. She stared straight into Catherine's eyes, then lowered her gaze to the clear champagne glass in her hand. Reflected in the golden liquid was Catherine's face, twisted by fear and wounded pride. "You asked who I am, Naomi," whispered her voice, soft but edged like thunder held back by force. "You will find out, although it seems it will take you longer than 5 minutes." Catherine laughed, a high, brittle laugh, warped by desperation to save face. "Ridiculous! You think you can intimidate me in my own gala?" An older man nearby coughed to hide a laugh. Several women covered their mouths. Catherine's confidence was slipping off her like a gown that no longer fit her shape. Furious, she motioned to security again. I said, "Remove her." Now. But this time, the two security guards didn't move. They exchanged looks, then bowed their heads to examine the tablet a server had just handed them. Their hesitation spread through the room like a spark touching dry leaves. "What is the problem?" Catherine snapped. One guard swallowed hard. "Ma'am, the guest list. Ms. Carter is listed as the primary donor." The noise in the room cut off as if someone had pressed a mute button. Catherine whipped around her face, drained of color. What the guard handed her the tablet. The words glowed clearly. "Naomi Carter, primary donor." An audible gasp rippled from the back of the room. A woman exhaled sharply. A man nearly dropped his wine glass. And in that moment, the exact moment Catherine realized, the woman she had insulted with every ounce of contempt she possessed was the person who had contributed the most money to the event that carried her family name. The room began to tilt. "Impossible," Catherine stammered, her voice breaking. "I have never heard of her." Naomi tilted her head, offering a soft smile that hid a blade beneath silk. "Real power," she said, "does not need to be heard to exist." Another wave of murmurs swept the room. Guests started checking their phones, typing her name. Screens lit up one after another. Carter Global Holdings, A private investment conglomerate. My goodness, market valuation in the tens of billions. Catherine opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her face flushed red with humiliation and anger, emotions tangling in her throat until she could barely speak. No, you only donated through a secondary fund. Naomi's smile sharpened. No, Catherine. I own that fund. A voice somewhere cried out. What you mean? Correct, Naomi interrupted gently. Your family's charity foundation operates on capital from Carter Global. My capital. My name sits on the contract you signed without bothering to read. The room broke into a storm of whispers. Catherine's face contorted, as if someone had ripped off the mask she had worn for years. Several wealthy guests exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to caution. A journalist at the back rose, slowly lifting her camera toward the two women facing off. Naomi looked around the room, her eyes sweeping every face, catching every flicker of changing perception. You think I threatened her? She asked. I do not need to. The truth is enough. Catherine clutched the edge of the table, her hand trembling. What do you want? Naomi did not answer immediately. Instead, she delivered a single sentence that sent a chill down every spine. Present. 5 minutes. 3 words. Small. But they hit the room like the beginning of a countdown. Suddenly, dozens of phones buzzed at once. The vibrating alerts rippled through the tables like a wave overturning everything in its path. A man checked his phone first, then nearly slid out of his chair. No way a woman grabbed her husband's phone. Oh my God, breaking news. Carter Global pulls $4.9 billion from the Whitmore Foundation. Those words, $4.9 billion, struck the banquet hall like a bolt of lightning. Catherine staggered. No, this is fake. It is fake. But every screen in the room displayed the same market alert, the same bank notifications, the same post from the largest economic news network. Transaction reversal, effective immediately, someone gasped. $4.9 billion, that is their budget for 3 full years. Their debt will collapse. Whitmore is finished. Security servers, guests, even the orchestra stared at Naomi as though she were the eye of the storm ripping across the room. Yet she simply stood there, spine-straight expression, free of gloating or cruelty, only the quiet certainty of someone who had reclaimed justice. Catherine wheezed, grabbing her phone and calling her CFO again and again. Daniel, pick up. Tell me this is wrong. It has to be wrong. But when Daniel Price burst into the room, with a face ashen as cold ash, every last thread of hope snapped. Ma'am, he said, his voice shaking. It is not wrong. All funds have been withdrawn. Accounts are empty. Credit lines are frozen. The board is not responding. The banks refuse communication. A strangled sound escaped Catherine, but she forced it down, clinging to the last scraps of her shattered dignity. Naomi looked at her, her gaze no longer sharp, but filled with the distant sorrow of someone who had seen arrogance drag many people into ruin. I told you, Naomi said quietly. You should have waited 5 minutes. And in that moment, the entire room realized this was not just a blow to the pride of a socialite. It was the instant a privileged system was dragged off its throne by the very silence it once dismissed. Done. The luxurious banquet hall suddenly felt far too small to contain the panic spreading through it, like fire catching silk, and Catherine Whitmore stood at the center of that blaze, her hands trembling as if she no longer recognized her own body. Panicked breathing, hushed whispers, and phones buzzing relentlessly blended into a chaotic symphony, a stark contrast to the opulence the gala had spent almost an hour trying to display. Naomi Carter remained exactly where she was, calm to a degree that felt unreal. She did not furrow her brows, did not step back, simply looked forward as if she knew precisely what came next, and as if everything was unfolding exactly the way it was meant to. "What did you do?" Catherine burst out, her voice shattering like glass, hitting the floor. Daniel Price, the CFO who had sprinted in moments earlier, was still struggling to catch his breath, but the truth in his eyes could not be hidden. He looked at Naomi with a mixture of fear and respect before turning to Catherine. "Naomi Carter Global is the primary source of capital for the Whitmore Foundation. The immediate withdrawal of $4.9 billion froze every connected account. All loans and reserve funds disappeared before we could respond." Catherine shook her head violently, her perfectly styled dark waves now frizzy with desperation. "Impossible, impossible. We are Whitmore. There is nothing left for Whitmore to hold on to," Daniel said quietly, as if he himself could not bear to hear the words leaving his mouth. "The banks have marked our fund as extremely high risk. The board is in an emergency meeting and has locked me out." The whispers swelled. "They lost their funding. My God, the entire corporation is collapsing right now. This will be the scandal of the decade." But when Naomi stepped forward, just slightly, the entire room fell silent at once, as if every single person feared missing a second of the history being written right in front of them. "Catherine," Naomi said softly, yet her voice carried farther than any scream could. "This is not something I did to you. This is the consequence of what you created." Catherine lifted her head, eyes red, the pride that had kept her at the top for years, crumbling piece by piece. "What do you want from me? An apology? Do you want me to get on my knees? Do you want me to admit I was wrong?" Naomi shook her head, a faint, sorrowful smile touching her lips. "I do not need you to admit anything. You have already said enough." Some guests nodded in agreement, others turned away in second-hand embarrassment, and a handful kept recording every moment like they were watching a live drama made for the internet. But to Naomi, this was no performance. This was truth. Truth did not need a spotlight to shine. Why? Catherine choked. "Why did you pull the money tonight?" Naomi tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp as a blade, poised before the strike. "Because you chose tonight to remind me of the contempt that people like you cast on people like me. You chose the timing. Not me." Catherine opened her mouth to argue, but at that exact second, a cascade of ping sounds erupted across the room as the world seemed to force itself into the conversation. A new alert flashed across dozens of screens. A woman at a nearby table gasped, "My God, there's a new article." A man read aloud, voice unsteady, "Whitmore Foundation on the brink of collapse. Carter Global confirms full withdrawal of capital. Whitmore Corporation facing imminent downfall." A journalist immediately switched on her live stream. "You are witnessing a historic moment. This might be the largest fall of a private philanthropic foundation in 20 years. Catherine stumbled backward, her legs buckling as if the marble floor beneath her had tilted. She panted, gripping the nearest table like she feared she might collapse under the weight of every staring eye. You will destroy my family's entire empire." Her voice sounded like someone drowning. "You do not understand the consequences. Thousands of employees, projects, families." Naomi stayed silent for several seconds, long enough for every heart in the room to tighten. Then she spoke, not loudly, but with a clarity that carved each word into the marble walls around them. "I am not destroying anyone. I am simply returning what belongs to justice. And if your empire can fall because of one woman you looked down on, then it was never strong to begin with. Soft exclamations rippled through the room, admiration growing visibly in people's eyes. But Naomi was not finished. She walked slowly toward the massive LED screen on stage, where the words, "Building Futures," still glowed a painful irony for the Whitmore family now. The real issue, Naomi said, is not the money that was withdrawn. It is the future you chose to build on belittling others. And when a future is built on arrogance, it takes only a gentle touch to make it collapse. Catherine sank into a chair, head in her hands, stripped entirely of the aura she once wielded so easily. Silence descended over the hall, so complete that the faint clinking of gemstones on someone's trembling gown could be heard. Naomi turned to look at her one last time. There was no hatred in her eyes, no triumph, only the cold understanding of someone who had long witnessed how entitlement leads people to their own downfall. 5 minutes, Naomi repeated softly. And you used those 5 minutes to prove exactly why everything had to change. Then, beneath the fading crystal lights, Naomi Carter walked away, neither victorious nor hurried, but with each step closing an old door and opening a new era, one where power belonged not to those who shouted the loudest, but to those strong enough to stay silent and still make the world listen. As Naomi Carter turned and walked away, it seemed the chaos in the banquet hall had reached its peak, but in truth, it had only been the overture to a true seismic collapse. Her silhouette, small against the gold-covered grandeur of the hall, carried a force so unmistakable that no one could look away. Glittering gowns, expensive tuxedos, champagne glasses catching crystal light. All of it had become nothing more than a backdrop for the moment. Power shifted from the loud to the silent. Catherine Whitmore remained slumped in her chair, her hands clenched into fists, as if trying to hold on to the last remnants of authority melting out of her fingers. But before Naomi could even reach the door, a sharp gasp erupted behind her. The young server, the one who had hesitated earlier, rushed to Catherine's side, clutching a tablet, blinking with red alerts. "Mrs. Whitmore," his voice trembled. "There are more notifications from the bank." Catherine snatched the screen like someone clinging to a final miracle. But when she saw it, her eyes widened horror, clawing through every inch of her. No, no, no. The numbers were negative depths, bottomless. The secondary funds, the guarantee accounts, the emergency reserves all gone. The room fell into a half-panicked, half-paralyzed state. Some guests hurried from their tables, whispering frantically. Others started live streams with faces lit by excitement, as if witnessing a public execution in modern form. And then came the moment that nearly stopped Catherine's heart. A sharp ding echoed as the giant screen on stage flickered to life. The LED backdrop shifted from the Foundation's promotional video to a real-time breaking news alert. Words appeared one by one. Slow and merciless, Carter Global confirms withdrawal of $4.9 billion. Whitmore Foundation insolvent. Experts call it the largest collapse in a decade. A few guests cried out. A woman clutched her chest. Someone dropped a glass, the shattering sound striking through the room like the final nail sealing a dynasty's fate. Catherine felt her blood drain from her body. Her mother had once said, "A family empire never dies from an outside enemy, but from the arrogance within." Now that sentence tore through Catherine's consciousness like a blade. "This is a conspiracy," Catherine snarled, grasping at the last shards of control. She cannot do this without a reason. Naomi halted, turning back. Her eyes held no gloating triumph, only the weariness of someone too familiar with being underestimated by people who believed she could only succeed by plotting. "A conspiracy," Naomi replied slowly. "What is happening here is basic arithmetic. I invest, I withdraw. You disrespect others, you lose what never belonged to you. Simple." Catherine shot up from her chair, legs trembling beneath a storm of emotions. "You do not understand my family centuries of work, you cannot." Naomi stepped closer, her voice gentle, in the way one speaks to a child refusing to grow up. "Catherine, you are the one who does not understand. Real power does not come from lineage or reputation. It comes from real value. And real value never stands with those who strip dignity from others." Another alert chimed loudly, this time from Daniel Price's phone. He looked down and his face went pale, as if his soul had fled his body. "Ma'am, there is more!" Catherine snapped toward him, her eyes bloodshot like veins ready to burst. What now? Daniel swallowed, barely able to speak. "The banks, they have frozen your personal assets, temporarily pending investigation." A strangled sob escaped Catherine, but she covered her mouth to keep it from spilling out. Several guests stood not to help her, but to step away from the disaster unfolding. Naomi watched, her eyes sorrowful, yet resolute. She picked up a champagne glass, raising it slightly, as if offering a farewell ritual. "One more thing," Catherine Naomi said, her voice soft as velvet, yet cold as forged steel. "This collapse is not an ending. It is the truth you should have seen long ago." Catherine tried to roar, but her voice shook. "How far do you want to ruin me?" Naomi set the glass down so gently the sound barely existed, and yet the silence that followed was louder than any crash. "I do not want to ruin you," Naomi said. "I only want to turn on the light, so the world can see who you truly are." A cold draft swept through the hall as the main doors opened for guests fleeing the disaster. Catherine's once striking red gown now looked like a misplaced shard of colour, drowning in the sea of judgmental stares. On the LED screen, a new headline pulsed, "The Arrogance of Whitmore Exposed." The power that once shielded Catherine was melting like ice under sunlight, and she could feel every drop slipping away. "You will regret this," Catherine said, but her words carried no weight. They were not a threat. They were the cracked voice of someone defeated. Naomi tilted her head, her gaze soft but filled with truth. "No, Catherine. The only person who must regret anything is the one who forgot how essential dignity truly is." And then, like a closing period at the end of a very long sentence, Naomi turned and walked out the doors, leaving behind a room where the crystal lights still glowed, but for the first time in years they reflected truth instead of the illusion of power. The gala was no longer a gala. It had become a public trial, and the verdict had already been delivered, not by a gavel, but by consequences the entire world was witnessing in real time. And Catherine had only just begun to understand the price of a single night of cruelty she once believed harmless. The grand doors behind Naomi closed with a soft click, so faint it should have meant nothing yet. The tiny sound pushed the entire room deeper into a truth no one dared to face. The Whitmore Empire, dazzling and towering through 3 generations, had begun to collapse, right under Catherine's feet. There was no music anymore, no laughter, none of the proud noise of high society. Only terrified whispers and a heavy silence, as if the hall were coated in ashes after a massive fire. Catherine stood frozen, both hands gripping the edge of the table, as if letting go would make her collapse on the spot. Her perfectly styled hair was now unraveled, her expensive makeup slipping off her pale face. Daniel Price stood beside her, clutching his phone with the expression of a man who knew the ship had already sunk, yet was still required to announce the final warning. "Mrs. Whitmore," he murmured, voice trembling, because he too was caught in this whirlpool. "The board, they are demanding an immediate explanation. They believe the financial instability has been hidden for too long." Catherine snapped toward him, rage briefly overpowering her fear. "I did not hide anything, But she stopped mid-sentence, as if someone had squeezed the voice out of her throat. In that suspended moment, Catherine finally realized how many warnings she had ignored, from blazing red financial reports to vague professional cautions. She had chosen to believe the Whitmore name stood above every storm, and that arrogance, the inheritance she had worn like a crown, had come back to strangle her. At a nearby table, a blonde woman whispered to her friend, trembling with excitement. Why was Naomi silent all this time? She could have exposed them months ago. Her friend replied with quiet admiration. Because she never needed to. The more powerful a person is, the less they need to speak. The sentence struck Catherine like another verdict. She squeezed her handkerchief, forcing herself toward the center of the hall in a last desperate attempt to reclaim control. "Everyone calm down," she called out, but her voice cracked thin and powerless. "This is only a temporary misunderstanding. The Whitmore Foundation is still stable, Stable, a middle-aged businessman cut in. Stable enough to lose $4.9 billion in minutes. I heard even your personal assets are frozen. The Whitmore family might be finished." Each word hit Catherine like a dart, tightening her chest and twisting her breath. An elderly woman, once her mother's closest friend, stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her arm. "Kate," she said softly, sadness weighing every syllable, that young woman did not bring you down. You did when you forgot others have dignity too. Catherine jerked away, unwilling to hear another word. She tried to stand tall, but the ground beneath her felt as if it were shifting, with every new headline flashing across the massive LED screen. Whitmore on the verge of total shutdown. Carter Global responds. This was precision, not emotion. Whitmore marine stock hits lowest point before market open. Catherine swallowed hard, trying to force her spine straight the way her mother once taught her. A Whitmore never bows. But tonight, her body no longer obeyed that pride. A staff member ran in, panting Mrs. Whitmore. "The press, they are outside. They want your statement about the crisis." The crisis? Those two words made her stomach twist. She had never imagined that her empire, a massive ship with thousands of employees, dozens of projects, hundreds of political ties, could topple because of one decision made by a woman she had dismissed the moment she saw her. Daniel Catherine whispered, voice shaking, "Is there any way to save this?" Daniel bit his lip, then told the truth, cutting through her last illusion. "No. Once Carter Global withdrew, no one is big enough to fill the gap. And with negative reports spreading, this fast few banks will risk stepping in." A weak laugh escaped Catherine, half delirious, half devastated. "So everything I built destroyed because I said a few things she didn't like." Daniel shook his head. "Not a few things, Catherine. It was an attitude. And it did not start tonight." His words stabbed the deepest part of Catherine's identity, the part she covered with her fiery red gowns, her superiority, her belief that her power was untouchable. A young guest, live streaming with thousands watching, said brightly, "Everyone, we are witnessing the biggest lesson in power and arrogance in 10 years. This is not drama. This is history. Catherine looked around. Faces once, admiring, now avoided her. People who used to flatter her were quietly packing their things and leaving. The swish of gowns across the cold stone floor sounded like the retreat of the Whitmore era. Finally, unable to endure it, Catherine whispered, hands trembling beyond control. I have to speak to her. I need to talk to. But when she looked toward the door, Naomi was already gone. Her calm presence no longer filled the hall. Only its echo remained, heavy, resonant, and impossible to erase. A nearby server murmured, "She does not need to say more. The world is already speaking for her." Catherine swayed. It was in that moment she understood that real power was never about sitting at the center table. It was about the ability to walk away and still have the entire room revolve around you. And on that gala night, Naomi Carter shifted the entire universe of the Whitmore dynasty, with nothing more than silence, placed in the right moment, the right place, and toward the right person. Outside the banquet hall, Naomi Carter descended the marble steps of the Whitmore Plaza Hotel, its white columns glowing as if watching every measured step she took, while leaving the place that had just witnessed a dynasty tremble. The New York night was sharply cold, the wind sweeping down Fifth Avenue, carrying with it the lingering echoes of panicked whispers from inside. But Naomi walked with absolute composure, as though the storm behind her had nothing to do with her at all. Her driver opened the door of the sleek black Maybach, his expression solemn, as if he understood. Tonight marked a turning point, not for the headlines, but for the city's entire hierarchy of power. As Naomi settled into the car, her phone buzzed. Lauren Mitchell, the CFO of Carter Global. Naomi Lauren said quickly, her voice laced with both excitement and strain. "The news is out. Financial journals, television networks, social platforms. The withdrawal was confirmed within 6 minutes of execution." Naomi leaned back, eyes drifting to the city lights streaking past the window. Market reaction. "Whitmore Marine stock is in free fall," Lauren replied. 3 major banks withdrew their guarantees. Their board is panicking. And she paused, tightening her tone. The internal audit leaked. There are signs of financial misconduct spanning years. Naomi closed her eyes. She was not surprised. Because a system built on arrogance will always invite corruption. Deceit always grows where entitlement is left unchecked. Do they know yet that Carter Global was their primary funding source? Now they do, Lauren said with a hint of dry irony. Funny, isn't it? They spent years looking down on us, and now they have to face the truth that without us they cannot stand. Naomi did not respond right away. The streetlights brushed her face in soft golden strokes. "Lauren," she said gently, "emotion is not the goal. Justice is." Lauren exhaled a long breath. "And you delivered that. No shouting, no public humiliation, just truth." Naomi gave a faint smile. Truth knows how to speak for itself. All we ever need to do is turn on the light. As the car turned onto the avenue toward Carter Global headquarters, Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time it was an alert from several major media outlets. Headlines flashed in the dim cabin light. "Naomi Carter changes the game. The Whitmore Empire shakes the most powerful silent woman in New York." Naomi swiped them away without opening. She refused to get lost in applause that could cloud her judgment. She knew the real battle had not begun, yet the night deserved a proper ending. When the car stopped beneath Carter Global's tower, a black steel monument towering among Manhattan's shining glass giants, Naomi stepped before the massive revolving doors. Her reflection appeared in the glass, a slender silhouette, sharp eyes, a face that held steady even in triumph. But deep within those eyes burned a fire not of revenge, but of responsibility. Inside the grand lobby, Naomi was greeted by Atlas Carter Global's central AI system, displayed as a full-height hologram. A neutral male voice spoke. "Welcome back, Director Carter." Atlas Naomi said, "Standing tall, display the withdrawal progress." In front of her, a cascade of financial models appeared, closed capital pipelines, reclaimed funds risk zones across the Whitmore Foundation, lit up in warning red. Process completed 100%, Atlas reported. Whitmore status, severe loss of liquidity. Bankruptcy prediction high. And the impact on employees, Naomi asked. Lauren entered at that moment, answering for the system. That's the complicated part. If Whitmore falls, thousands will be affected. However, she placed a thick folder on the table. We can acquire their operational division, keep their staff, replace the leadership. Naomi touched the file. Not to save them, she said softly. To save the innocent people trapped inside their system. Lauren nodded. Exactly what you said from the beginning. Justice, not revenge. Naomi turned toward the floating 3D model of Whitmore Marine. A vast structure, yet hollow at the core. It never needed an attack. It was already collapsing. The only question was who would be brave enough to expose the truth first. And Naomi had done exactly that. She had simply flipped the switch. While she analyzed the data, Naomi's phone rang again. This time the caller was Charles Whitmore, Catherine's father, the honorary chairman of the Whitmore Empire. She hesitated for a brief second, then answered. Ms. Carter, his voice trembled, though he tried to retain the pride of an older generation. We would like to meet. Tonight. We need to speak with you. Naomi remained silent for a few long seconds, long enough for him to understand the power no longer rested with the once revered Whitmore family. I will consider it, she said at last. But you must understand, this is no longer a matter between me and your daughter. This concerns your entire leadership. Silence. Then a shaky breath. I understand, he whispered. Please give us a chance to make this right. Naomi ended the call quietly. She felt no triumph hearing his desperation. But it confirmed one truth power never belongs to those who shout the loudest in a room. It belongs to the one who can change the room without raising their voice. Lauren approached her. Are you all right, Naomi? Looked out the floor to ceiling windows at the Manhattan night, its lights flickering like the heartbeat of a living giant. All right, she said. But there's a lot more work to do. She walked toward the elevator, her heels striking firm, resonant beats against the polished stone floor, every step steady, certain, unshaken. That night, as the elevator lifted, Naomi to the top floor, Manhattan shrank beneath her. It felt as though the whole city was leaning in to hear the quiet breath of a woman they had never known until now. Naomi gazed down at the flowing streams of headlights below, like veins pulsing through a massive body. This is not destruction, she murmured. This is correcting the habits of power. And in that moment, Naomi Carter was no longer merely the woman who walked out of a gala. She had rewritten the rules of an entire world, using silence that roared louder than any ovation. As the clock slipped past 1 a.m, the Manhattan sky sank into a deep black, like a velvet curtain hiding the secrets of those who wielded power. On the top floor of Carter Global, Naomi Carter stood before a wall of glass, the city lights reflecting across her calm blade, sharp face. She knew the night would not end with the chaos at the gala. It would end with the final confrontation with the Whitmore family, where apologies arriving too late could save nothing except the truth. The elevator chimed softly, announcing the arrival of her guests. Lauren Mitchell stepped closer, resting a hand on Naomi's arm, her eyes asking one last time, "Are you sure you want to meet them in person?" Naomi nodded. There is no lesson more lasting than seeing consequences with your own eyes. The elevator doors slid open. Charles Whitmore stepped out, first silver hair, once commanding posture, now trembling under the weight of a collapsing empire. Behind him, Catherine followed slower, stripped of the confidence of a powerful CEO. She walked like someone who had lost both her anchor and her illusion of invincibility. Her eyes were swollen, her face drained of color, as if she had left a piece of her soul behind in the ballroom. They sat at the long glass table, and silence stretched across the room, tight like a string ready to snap. Charles spoke first. "Miss Carter, before anything else on behalf of my family, I offer our deepest apology." Naomi said nothing, waiting for him to continue. Charles drew a heavy breath, each word seeming to weigh him down. "We were wrong, and my daughter was wrong. I am not making excuses, but we have thousands of employees, thousands of families. If Whitmore Foundation and Whitmore Marine collapse, many innocent people will be buried under it." Naomi looked directly at him. "And you think I do not know that?" Charles lowered his head. "We are asking you to give us a chance to make this right." Catherine lifted her gaze, her eyes wet but still carrying the faint embers of stubbornness. "I know I said things I shouldn't have. I know I was rude, arrogant, condescending. But I didn't think." Naomi folded her arms, her expression cold. "Didn't think that the person you looked down on could shake your entire empire, or didn't think your words had enough power to destroy." Catherine's voice caught in her throat. She couldn't answer. Lauren placed a folder on the table. "Carter Global has prepared a proposal, not to save the Whitmore family, but to protect the people harmed by your reckless leadership." Naomi opened the folder and pushed it toward the father and daughter. "This is the plan." Charles opened it with trembling hands. His eyes widened as he read the title, "Carter Global's Proposal to Purchase All Assets of Whitmore Marine Retain. Employees preserve pensions. Terminate entire executive leadership." Catherine shot to her feet. "No, you want to steal our company." Naomi lifted her head, and the reflections of the city glimmered like fire in her eyes. "I am not stealing anything. I am paying. The only thing being taken from you is the privilege to keep harming people." Catherine gripped the table edge, breathing unsteadily. "And me, what am I in all of this? A puppet? Someone thrown out of the company my family built?" Naomi leaned back slightly, her expression no longer angry, but brutally honest. "What I intend for you," Naomi said slowly, "is that you finally learn the lesson you ignored your entire life." The air grew so heavy that one could almost hear every heartbeat in the room. Charles placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder, his voice breaking. "Catherine, you must accept this. It is the only way the people who work for you will not suffer for your mistakes." Catherine broke into tears. Not the tears of regret, but the tears of someone losing a limb, the Whitmore title she had used as armor against the real world. "You could have destroyed me," Catherine said, her voice shattering, "and you didn't." Why? Naomi rose. The city lights behind her made her look like a silhouette carved out of the storm. Because destruction teaches nothing." Naomi said, each word forged from steel. "Consequences do." She walked toward Catherine, not with anger, not with contempt, but with the clear, unwavering resolve of someone who understood the value of dignity and the cost of losing it. "You think you were humiliated tonight?" Naomi asked. "No. What happened at the gala was a mirror. It showed you who you are without your title to hide behind." Catherine trembled, as though those words cut through every layer of armor she had ever worn. Naomi continued, "I am not destroying you because I do not need to. You are destroying yourself. I am only removing the power that allowed you to hide the truth." Lauren stood, placing a pen on the table, turning it toward Catherine. Naomi delivered the final blow, quiet but absolute. "Sign this, and keep the last piece of dignity you have." Silence stretched long enough to bend time. Finally, Catherine picked up the pen with shaking hands, so unsteady that the nib scraped the paper. She signed, not with the bold stroke of a CEO, but with the fragile tremor of someone who had just lived through the greatest collapse of her life. When she set the pen down, Naomi nodded gently. Not triumphant, not satisfied, simply acknowledging that order had been restored. Charles stood and bowed to Naomi, a gesture no one would have believed a Whitmore capable of. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not destroying us, and for saving the people who did not deserve our failures." Naomi's gaze softened slightly. "I am not saving you," she said. "I am saving those trapped under the shadow of your arrogance." As the two left the room, Catherine paused, looking back at Naomi one last time, fear still in her eyes. But for the first time, a flicker of change. And in that moment, Naomi realized something. The greatest punishment was not losing power, but facing oneself for the first time. Manhattan glimmered beneath the tower, but the sky felt different now, deeper, calmer, as if offering a silent respect to the woman who had reset the balance of power, not with raised voices, but with clarity. When the conference room doors closed behind the Whitmore father and daughter, Naomi remained still for a few seconds, listening to the silence that settled over the space, a silence no longer heavy, but like the first breath after a violent storm. Lauren stepped beside her, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder, her eyes filled with both admiration and relief. "You did what no one else dared," Lauren whispered. "You didn't just end a toxic culture, you replaced it." Naomi didn't answer right away. She walked toward the vast glass wall, gazing down at the city that still glittered, as if no war of power had taken place tonight. Manhattan never slept, and neither did power. But for the first time, Naomi felt that the weight of power was no longer a stone on her chest. It was a light she was responsible for keeping lit, Lauren. Naomi said after a moment, her voice quieter. "What needs to be done next?" Lauren opened her tablet charts and lists appearing in rapid succession. "We need to initiate the transfer of Whitmore Marine's assets, restructure their entire personnel system, issue stabilization notices to investors, prepare a recovery plan for the impacted employees." And she paused, hesitating before continuing. "The media is exploding. Everyone wants to hear you say something." Naomi turned her eyes, sharp, yet calm. "No," she said. "No statements, no speeches, no explanations. The truth will tell its own story." Lauren let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "You really are the only person who can bring down a corporation without speaking more than one sentence to the press." Naomi gave a faint half-smile. "Talking doesn't create change. Action does." Just then, the elevator opened again. A group of Carter Global analysts and senior managers stepped in, their expressions buzzing with excitement and nerves. One of them spoke quickly. "Director Carter, the new model you submitted this morning. The Harbour Bridge Initiative, it's ready. We just need your confirmation on launch timing." Naomi nodded. Right now, the team dispersed, working with the speed of people who understood they were participating in a historic shift. Lauren looked at Naomi, her gaze softening in a way that carried unspoken understanding. "You know, anyone else would have used tonight to gloat, to rise in glory, to take revenge. But you, Naomi, cut in gently. I used to be the person sitting at the end of the line." Lauren: "I used to stand outside doors like these, wondering what it would take to be allowed into the rooms where decisions were made. I don't want anyone else to be left outside that door." Lauren stared at her, recognizing at last the true fuel behind Naomi's seemingly cold decisions. It wasn't power, it wasn't vengeance. It was an old wound that had turned into a vow. Naomi took a breath and stepped back toward the center of the room. "Activate Harbour Bridge," she said. "Tonight." Atlas appeared in holographic form, its neutral voice steady. "Confirm activation." "Confirm." The control panel lit up, revealing dozens of connection points across a digital map of the United States, the cities where Whitmore factories once operated, the small towns where workers depended on their pension funds, the communities of people of color and immigrant laborers neglected for years by the old leadership. Atlas reported restructuring completed, employee support budgets transferred, frozen insurance and pension accounts restored. Lauren covered her mouth, overcome. "My God, Naomi, you just saved more people in one night than Whitmore has saved in 30 years. Naomi shook her head. "I didn't save anyone. I gave them back what they were always owed." At that moment, Lauren's phone vibrated violently. She checked the screen, her eyes widening. "Naomi, you need to see this." On the screen was a live broadcast, a long line of former Whitmore Marine employees standing in front of their old headquarters, hugging each other and crying because their payroll had just been restored, thanks to Carter Global's intervention. A middle-aged man, tears streaming, said into the camera, "I thought my family had lost everything. Thank you to whoever saved us. Even if we don't know their name." Naomi watched, feeling something tighten and warm in her chest, a feeling only understood by those who have stood on the edge of despair and survived. Lauren placed a gentle hand on Naomi's back. "Naomi, you created a miracle." Naomi shook her head slowly, her gaze deep and steady. "No, Lauren, I did the right thing in a system that has been wrong for far too long." She looked back out over the city, beneath her Manhattan, glittering, proud, and unforgiving. And tonight, Naomi murmured, power finally returned to where it belongs. And in the highest glass room of the city that night was no longer about the aftermath of a collapse. It became the moment order was restored, when from the shattered tiles of arrogance, a new beginning, fairer, kinder, and more human, was built by the hands of a woman who entered the gala as someone underestimated and walked out as someone who rewrote the rules of the world. At dawn the next morning, Manhattan was covered in a layer of silver light, cold, yet pristine, as if the entire city had been washed clean of yesterday's glittering illusions. Naomi Carter stood in her office on the 83rd floor, hands wrapped around a cup of hot black coffee, her eyes watching the first rush of commuters streaming into the subway stations. Last night she had reset the balance of power, but this morning she had to decide how to turn that new balance into a lasting system, one not built on someone else's downfall, but on what she believed justice is not applause. It is sustained responsibility. Lauren walked in with a stack of newspapers, her face tired, yet glowing with the excitement of someone who had pulled an all-nighter for a worthy victory. "Naomi, you're on the front page of every major paper." She set the stack down. The headlines jumped out at Naomi, the woman who rewired New York's power map. Naomi Carter, silent but unbreakable. Whitmore Empire falls, thousands of families saved. Naomi skimmed them, neither pleased nor proud. "Lauren," she said quietly, "you know I don't need any of this." Lauren smiled softly. "I know. But the world needs it. They've been taught that power belongs to the loudest voice. You showed them that power can be quiet and still strong as steel." Naomi didn't reply. Her eyes drifted to a live broadcast, playing on the large screen, outside Whitmore Marine Headquarters. Employees were gathered not in despair, but in relief. A young woman stood at the center, tears shining in her eyes. "We don't know who made the decision to restore our pensions," she said, choking up. "But thank you for remembering that we're human, too." Watching her, Naomi felt something constrict and soften in her chest. If she had broken years ago, under the weight of being underestimated, none of the people on that screen would be receiving what they deserved today. The elevator chimed. A staff member hurried in, anxious. "Director Carter, the Federal Finance Committee, is requesting an emergency meeting. And the governor of New York wants a private appointment with you this afternoon." Naomi didn't look surprised. When power moves, politics always rushes to find where it has relocated. "What about the Whitmores?" she asked. "They, the staffer swallowed, want to issue a public apology, and they're asking for cooperation to clean their legacy." Naomi let out a quiet laugh, not mocking, just amused by the irony. "When power slips away," she said, "people suddenly remember morality." Lauren stepped forward with another document. "And this you need to see." It was Whitmore Marine's full financial report, hidden debts, suspended projects, violations swept under carpet. The red numbers bled across the page like wounds left untreated. "They've been passing risk to their employees for years," Naomi said, her voice sharpening. "This wasn't negligence, it was a system." Lauren nodded. "But because of you, sir, everything will be rearranged." Naomi turned to the holographic economic map of their entire ecosystem. Every glowing dot represented a business healing from old damage. "Lauren," she said, "it's time to announce Harbor Bridge." Lauren raised her brows. Today, Naomi nodded. "The world needs to see what we're building, not just what we dismantled." The press release was sent. A statement not long, not poetic, but clear Harbor Bridge initiative launched a $4.9 billion fund for youth development, women entrepreneurs, labor communities, and employees affected by the failures of old corporations. No demands for praise, no expectations for gratitude, only a demand for fairness. Within 10 minutes, social media erupted, not with arguments but with stories. Photos of factory workers holding signs that read, "Thank you." A video of a mother saying her husband's frozen paycheck had finally been released. Teachers from struggling districts sending messages, thanking the woman whose quiet voice made the world listen. Naomi watched silently. Her eyes softened like a lake after the wind calms. "Lauren," she said, "I don't want Harbor Bridge to become a new empire." Lauren smiled. "It won't. Because the person leading it is you." Naomi exhaled slowly. Then she looked out at the city again, the skyscrapers glowing like thousands of lanterns, illuminating every choice she made. And that morning, Naomi realized something. The strongest part of power is not the ability to make people fear you, but the responsibility to make people feel safe. Manhattan shifted gently under the first true light of day, and on the highest floor, Naomi Carter prepared to step into the next phase, not to secure a throne, but to prove that a better world is not born from the shouting of the strong, but from the choices of those who know how to listen. And Naomi was ready, because once she had turned on the light, no darkness could ever make her step back again. That afternoon, as the sun rested on the tops of Manhattan's skyscrapers, Naomi Carter stepped out onto the balcony of the 83rd floor, where the wind blew so fiercely it felt capable of sweeping away the heavy memories of the gala night. Beneath her, the city functioned like an enormous machine, car horns signal, lights the relentless motion of millions. But up here the world felt strangely quiet. A quiet belonging to someone who had rebalanced power, not with shouting, but with truth. Inside the meeting room behind her, Lauren was speaking with the legal team, the human resources leads, and the restructuring consultants all gathered around documents sprawling across the table, plans to transform Whitmore Marine into a humane, transparent community, restoring organization. But Naomi didn't join them immediately. She needed a moment alone to release the weight pressing against her chest. Not the weight of victory, but the weight of what she had just set in motion. Her phone buzzed gently. A message from Charles Whitmore. "Thank you for saving the people we forgot we were supposed to protect." Naomi placed the phone on the railing, her gaze drifting toward the river. "That responsibility should never have been forgotten," she whispered. Behind her, the glass door opened softly. Lauren stepped out, holding an envelope. "This was just delivered," she said. Naomi opened it. Inside was a single folded page, the handwriting soft but trembling. "I am not asking for your forgiveness. I only want to learn again. Catherine." Naomi stared at the letter for a long time. The wind tried to lift its edge away, but she held it still. Lauren Naomi asked quietly. "Do you believe a person can truly change?" Lauren thought for a moment. "If they are forced to see themselves through the eyes of someone they used to look down on, maybe they will change faster than we think." Naomi let out a faint smile, though a deep sadness flickered beneath it. "I didn't do all this so Catherine could change. I did it for the people who never had the chance to speak." Just then, the elevator inside chimed again. A staff member rushed in, nearly tripping over the carpet. "Director Carter, the Global Council just sent an invitation they want you to lead next month's summit on responsible power. And the media is calling you the new symbol of integrity." Naomi closed her eyes, her breath sinking low. A symbol, she repeated. "They have no idea how hard I fought not to become someone like the people who hurt me years ago." Lauren looked at her full of understanding. "And that's exactly why they call you a symbol." Naomi turned back to the city. The sunset washed every glass panel in gold, creating a view both beautiful and unforgiving, like the world she was trying to change. "Prepare the announcement," she said. "If they want me to talk about power, I will, but not about how to hold it, about how to use it to lift others." Lauren nodded and returned to the meeting room. Naomi followed a moment later, looking at her team people who stood beside her, not for money or titles, but because they believed her way of leading could change something far bigger than the company. "Let's begin," Naomi said. "Not to make history, but to make sure history does not repeat its old mistakes." Everyone took their seats, the screen lit up with the detailed plans of the Harbor Bridge Initiative, new financial models labor system, restoration routes and strategies for community support. Naomi opened the first document, her gaze steady. And in that moment, Lauren understood something Naomi herself had never said aloud. Naomi had not been born to destroy an old empire. She had been born to build a new world, one where justice was not a reaction, but a foundation. The meeting began. The city shifted from sunset to night. Lights came on across thousands of buildings, like countless small lighthouses glowing in the dark. Naomi drew a deep breath, her voice firm, yet warm. Let's build a world where a child, no matter where they are born, never believes they must make themselves smaller in front of anyone. And that was the moment the legacy of Naomi Carter truly began, not from the power she claimed, but from the way she chose to use it to create a fairer tomorrow. From the perspective of a specialist in organizational culture and systemic power, Naomi Carter's journey reminds us that true influence does not lie in overpowering others, but in using one's position to straighten the distorted lines of an entire system. She did not retaliate, she rebuilt, and it is that choice that makes change truly lasting. If this story resonates with you, please like and subscribe so we can continue spreading the values that matter. Before you leave the video, comment 3 words: keep justice alive.